What is going on? We are here for another amazing episode of the Droppin Knowledge podcast. This is episode 9, which means we have this and then one more, and then we are back on hiatus for a little bit before we return for season 3. But I'm glad I was able to get this young lady. I've known her for 15
We've
known each other for some years. We've worked together. She's done some amazing work for me. And I mentioned her a lot in her line of business and what she does with other entrepreneurs, et cetera. And so I thought it'd be great to have her on. And so we're going to talk about the world of PR, public relations today. So I have my good friend and business mate, Vanessa Abron. How are you doing, Vanessa?
Hi, I am well. Welcome to my creepy basement, just in time for Halloween.
Sorry, you're in the building, so that's all that matters. So we're going to talk about public relations. I think it impacts so many different types of businesses. Although we've kind of worked together in the entertainment realm, companies, et cetera, that are not outside of entertainment, they all leverage public relations. And so I think a good way to begin is, why don't you talk about what it actually means? What's the role of public relations within a company?
Yes. That's actually a very good question to ask, because you have no idea how many people really don't know what that means. I have people come to me wanting advertising, wanting, me to be their social media manager. And that's, all of public relations, digital marketing, social media, all of that ties in together into marketing. So I'll say that first, like all of that is in the world of marketing. Public relations, however, is the definition that I've created for is the management of your overall public reputation and your relationships with the publics that you serve. So I think that's the easiest way that I can describe public relations, is the management of your public reputation and the relationship with the publics that you serve. Does that make sense, or do I need to elaborate? Is that self-explanatory?
No, it makes great sense. And I'm sure we're going to get into, in depth. So I'm sure it'll even come more full circle as we kind of chat about it. So for the purpose of our conversation, I think we're going to spend most of our time talking about public relations on the entrepreneur entertainment side, because that's the side that we've worked with. So tell me about Vanessa Abron. How did she actually get into public relations? Is it something that you came up wanting to do, or is it something that came by chance?
Okay, this is how I'll start the story. Mm-hmm. Always wanted to work in music, like since I was a little girl. Like used to write rhymes, still kind of do. Was into music, piano, dance, concert choir, all of those things. So I was on this and actually that's how you met me, is I was on this track to work in the music business. And at that time that you and I met, I was working for a marketing company called Shrewd Marketing and Promotions.
That's right,
and
that's right.
We were the Midwest Chicago marketing company for brands like Def Jam, Interscope, Bad Boy, Virgin. Like, so cool, to like do these things. And I was giving records to DJs and getting their feedback on new songs before we dropped it, and hosting like lifestyle events at sneaker shops, and going to clubs and seeing how the clubs are reacting to different songs, and going to like different lifestyle shops and putting up little displays so people can check out music. But this was all before Spotify, all before iTunes. So the music industry took a drastic turn where everyone started to lose their job. And I was like, what am I going to do? So a friend of mine at the time, she had just graduated from school with a degree in public relations, and was like, well, Vanessa, I don't want to do public relations, but I think this would be something you're good at. And I was like, Mike, let me look into it. Because when I was in college, when I was an undergrad, I took one PR course, and my PR teacher said, Vanessa, you should think about public relations. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And the reason why I didn't want to do it at that time was because I thought PR, and I still do, I thought PR was the career for the snooty girls, because the girls that were like really snooty and highfalutin at Dillard University, they were the PR majors, and I did not identify with them. I thought I was the cool girl that, I was hosting Freestyle Fridays, in the student union on, every week, and working with the radio station. Like, that PR, that just wasn't me. Little did I know that was already PR implementation, but we'll talk about that later. And so I was like, no. And so fast forward back to that time when everyone was losing their jobs and I was kind of like, where am I going to go? I decided to start all over again and pursue public relations. So to answer your question, no, public relations was not a job that I thought I would be doing. And when I did it, I didn't even know I was going to be doing it for this long. I thought it was going to be something to hold me over until I came back to the music. Right. It's funny how life plays tricks on you.
That's right. So what's kept you there? You talked about you didn't know you were going to be in here this long. What is it about PR and public relations that actually has done it for you for this long?
So I'm going to say this in the most humble way possible. I am really good at public relations. It was just something that I was really good at. As you know, I didn't study it in school, but as I said, as the definition is the management of your public reputation, how you manage relationships with your publics you serve. I think I had a natural inclination of developing relationships with people and managing that. And I was able to take that natural skill set to develop a career. So it is a lot of work. Don't get me wrong. Like there's a lot of tedious moments. There are a lot of no's, but it was a lot of me just being me. So it came a little bit easier for me because I was just being myself, which actually was a gift and a curse because in some PR circles, who I am does not make sense in public relations. Okay. But in other instances, it did. So I think I do like it. I do enjoy it. It's not my number one passion. Okay. But not to say that it's not a passion. It just wasn't my number one passion. But I was good at it, and and I saw a need for it. It was something that when I became to understand it and know it, and I saw how it worked, and it was a way that I could help people the best I knew possible. And does that make any sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So for anyone listening online right now, as we're doing this podcast live, make sure that you tag someone, share this. I'm sure that we're just starting our conversation about PR and public relations. So any entrepreneurs, artists, etc., they're going to want to check this out. Make sure that you follow us on our Facebook page, Droppin Knowledge Podcast, on Instagram, Droppin Knowledge Podcast, and then go search us on YouTube as well at the Droppin Knowledge Podcast. You can check out previous episodes, etc. So Vanessa, like as an entrepreneur, I think the last business that I spun up in the beginning of 2017, Classic Hip Hop Lives, right? I just automatically said, hey, we got to get some PR. We got to get the word out there. And so let me reach out to Vanessa, right? And so is there I understand in big business, right? Because they already have a public reputation, et cetera. But like for a new business that's starting out, when is the right time that they should engage with somebody to maybe handle PR? Should they get the business going a bit? Is that one of the initial steps that they should take? Kind of talk about that.
Oh my gosh. So your timing is right. Like you're right on time. So I'm actually, as we're discussing, I'm pulling up a document that I created because I've been independent for the past 5 years. Okay. And after working for myself for five years, there's been some mistakes that I've made, and you figure things out. And one of the things that I'm learning is that no, everyone is not ready for public relations. Okay. And so I created this list of is agency Abron right for you? And I'm not going to say public relations isn't right for everybody. I would just say what I offer may not be right for everyone. There may be a publicist or public relations professional that may help people regardless of where they are. And that's great. And I think that's the thing that you have to that's the first thing you need to realize as a business person is that everyone isn't best for you. It doesn't mean that person in that profession isn't good at what they do, but you have different people that do the same thing because it's the energy that they have that resonates with you and what you're trying to do. So I think that's number one is to just really find what you're looking for. However, I do think some of the things that I've created is a basic of foundation. So one of the things that I like for a client to have is to have already consistently created content that tells their story. And what happens is that someone will come to me and they'll like, I have a business and I want PR.
Right.
And it's like, well, okay, that's great. And they probably have a great story to tell, but it's like, but what have you done? So like, there's no website, there's no social media presence. They haven't done any self-promotion on their own. They haven't told their friends and family. It's like just this idea. And it's my job to go out and get everybody to know who they are. And that's not realistic.
Right.
It's not realistic because first and foremost, when you create something, you have to tell your story first before you want someone else to tell your story. Mm-hmm. And of course, as you do that, you can reshape your story. It can change a little bit, right. And someone can help you flesh that out. But to come out and say, Vanessa, I got this business, get me popular. I'm not the right person for that. I think you need to do some sort of self-promotion before you reach out to a public relations professional. And also it helps you benchmark, because oftentimes when you start a business, you often don't have a lot of capital, right? You don't have a lot of capital. So it's best for you to see what you can do on your own before you reach out to other people, so you can benchmark where you are, see where you need to go, and then someone else can help you pick up the pieces. Even as an entrepreneur myself, like I had to do the same thing. I have to be my own PR person. I have to do my own promotions, and I have to know what that looks like before I hand it off to someone else. And I can say, I did this, I did X, Y, and Z. After doing X, Y, and Z, X worked, Z didn't work, Y was okay. I might need some help here. Let's talk. And then the person that's helping you can go like, okay, this is okay. Looking at what you did, these are the recommendations that I have. However, you can't hire somebody to help you get all of these things together through consultations and things like that. But I think that's a waste of money because I think when you're new and you're at that level, you don't have a lot of capital, right? And you want to slowly see it grow. So I think even if you did invest in someone, the results that you are expecting at that point isn't going to be what you're looking for. Actually, that was kind of a conversation that you and I had, is where I said, we did a little bit, and knowing where you wanted to go, I said, let's pause, because I knew that where you wanted to go and what PR was going to give you wasn't going to be what you needed at that time. And I advised you to actually invest your dollars somewhere else, like maybe some digital marketing campaigns and things like that before you do before you do public relations, which is another thing, because if you do have money, the great thing about digital marketing is that it's guaranteed. You're guaranteed to see this, to have these many eyes on this and things of that nature. PR is supposed to be a supplement to that. Public relations is supposed to be the cosign on that. So it's like, here I am telling my story, and I have, I'm doing my self promotions and I'm doing digital marketing and things of that nature. And then public relations is supposed to kind of like seal the deal. So so it can say like, I'm telling my story. And as I tell my story, the New York Times and WGN also says that this is a story too. So it's not just a monolithic way of telling the story. So it's a way to, kind of have people co-sign on what you're doing. And it's also a way to continue to keep your name in conversations, because, it's like you want people to hear about you from multiple avenues. So those multiple avenues is what it will do for you, and just keep you relevant and keep you engaged in conversations. And it positions you as a thought leader in your industry. But to have it just to be like, I need visibility, I wouldn't say that that's a great idea.
You know what? You dropped a lot there. If anybody's checking this out and you've looked at public relations or thought about it, she just gave you a lot of nuggets. Let's talk about like a specific activation. And given that we have history, we can talk about kind of specifically where we were. And so I launched Classic, me and my partner, Omar Muhammad, we launched Classic Hip Hop Lives back in February of 2017. We're coming up with our first concert, which what we did is we celebrated golden era hip hop, right? And so first concert, we were doing MC8, we were doing AZ, and we were doing Freeway, right? And so we want to be covered, right? And I think sometimes as an entrepreneur, you you don't necessarily know the swim lanes of everyone, right? Because we're trying to basically get promotion to help sell tickets and et cetera, et cetera. What are you trying to do? You hear what my vision is. You hear what my goal is. You kind of know, yeah, it's about the company, but it's all about also about this specific concert. What do you have to do to get what you need from me and then go to your specific resources and contacts to actually make it come to fruition? Talk about just the process.
I need you to give me a story that people want to listen to and hear. So, okay, Classic Hip Hop Liz is a little different because you are dealing with the cool thing about you is that you're dealing with celebrities already. And so media likes celebrities. They like stories that includes people that they already know.
Got it.
So that was the one thing that you had that I had leverage is that you're working with people that people recognize. People recognize Scarface. They recognize Freeway. They recognize AZ. They recognize MCA. Even if it's old school or whatever, it's recognizable names that people already know and trust. So I was it was easier for me to reach out to like hip hop platforms and say like, oh, AZ is coming back to the forefront after X amount of years to do a show. By the way, this is the first time he's going to do a show in front of a live band, you know? So like, it's like that. It's like, oh, that's newsworthy, that story. So you have to make people go like, oh, that's cool.
Right.
AZ doing a show in Chicago for one night. That wasn't a lot. It could have been something that I could have worked with, but saying like, oh, this is the first time that he's doing a concert in front of a live band. Like, like that's like, oh, that's interesting. Why is he doing this?
Right.
Who's putting this together? So it's like taking like the pieces of your story and making it interesting to make people want to cover it. And so then you have to think about the perspective of the person covering it. And that's, I think a lot of people don't think about, and that's my job.
Okay.
So we think that what we're doing is great, and it is, right? Everything, like we created something, we want the world to know about it, and it's wonderful. Yes. I don't want to say anyone's creation isn't great.
Sure.
However, from a reporter or editor standpoint, they need people to click on stuff. Like, so when they create the article or when they do the interview, they need it to be something that's going to keep people watching or that's going to click and they're going to stay on that website for X amount of long and they're going to read the whole thing and they're going to watch the video. Like, that's what they need because they need that because how they stay in business is by the advertisers who support them. So when they get advertisers, this is how they make their money. So for advertisers to want to spend their money on them, they have to come back and say, oh, we have so many unique visitors per month. We have so many click-throughs. People stay on pages for 2 minutes or how long ever it is, or they are watching our program, for this long. And, they, whatever it is, they have to give those metrics that people are engaged.
Right.
And so even though your story is cool and unique, it doesn't help the editor or the reporter that if they cover it and no one looks at it. So that's the reason why you have to have like those things like what's the clickbait? What's going to make people want to, look at that? So you have to make sure that what you're doing is going to give the reporter and the editor what they need to keep a sustainable business as well.
Right.
So you kind of have to think in that mindset. I actually just worked with a client and the reporter, I actually thought the story came out pretty decent considering the circumstances. So of course the client wants it to be all about client did this and client did that and blah, blah, blah. However, the client was associated with a particular celebrity. So the celebrity got a little bit of the, the flavor. It was this is how it went. I wouldn't say got all the flavor, but the celebrity was at the top. And then as you kept reading the story, then you got to know about the client. Okay. And so the client that I was working with was upset because the client wasn't the headline, but it was like, but the client isn't the clickbait.
Right.
They have to tell this story to get the person to click through it. And then once they start reading it, then they'll see the meat of the story.
Right.
However, there was a situation with you, which I understood your situation too, which is the crazy thing about PR. Well, not the crazy, but the hard thing about it was that we did a story and we offered an interview with the reporter to one of your celebrities. Mm-hmm. And I can understand why you were upset. Well, you weren't upset, but not too happy about it, because they kind of put classic hip hop lives all the way at the bottom,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just like, okay. And that's my job to know, okay, what reporter is going to do that. And, what's, and so that was experience for me too, because that's my job, is like, okay, if this reporter is going to cover it, then this is what they're going to do with this story. Maybe I don't reach out to this person because I know that this person only wants this kind of story, and they're going to put my stuff at the end. So even though we want this, they're not going to showcase it in the best light. So let's go somewhere else where it may be showcased in the best light. And sometimes it may not be the most popular media platform, but you kind of like sometimes want a combination of the two, because when people do search, when they search whatever it is that you're looking for, you want to see the stories that, are like that at least tell the real story.
Right.
And then sometimes it's a smaller outlet. While it may be smaller, if they have that right niche audience, like if it's like, you would rather have something on a platform that's only 1,000 people, but if that 1,000 audience was all like hip hop heads that was into golden era hip hop, that's better than going to a platform that has 1 million followers and maybe only a couple hundred of them are hip hop heads and they really don't care. So it's like, you kind of have to like pay attention to those things too. I just went off on a tangent. Am I staying on subject?
Yeah, you're good. You're good. Everything you're giving is golden. So, but I do want to follow up. So I kind of like, and one of my businesses is credit restoration. So I help people who have damaged credit improve their credit. But in that process, I always explain to them is there is going to be work done on your behalf, although the result may not be finite, right? Mm-hmm. And you kind of feel that in your business. I think we've had a conversation about it, but I hire you to go do X, Y, and Z. Again, I'm in love with what I'm doing. I think it's great, et cetera, but you have to go get people interested. And so you can go do the work, but nobody may bite. Is that something that is that a challenge in the world of PR in terms of just keeping clients happy and having to break the news and say, nobody is really interested in what you're doing? And how do you handle those situations, and how can individuals keep from maybe having those situations occur? Because you almost feel like it's bad money spent when nothing happens.
So I'll answer the last question first. I don't think it's bad money spent.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you why. Because sometimes, and what I've noticed often, is that even though I may not get the coverage when you want me to get it, that reporter remembers, like, oh, you was working with so-and-so. I'm now doing a story on credit because this happened. Is your client available for this? So sometimes even when you're pitching, even if you don't get that story right away, just the mere act of doing the outreach puts you on the radar of these media platforms. So if they do happen to come across a story that makes sense for it, then they know to come to you. That just happened actually. That just happened recently. I was pitching a client to a reporter, and the reporter wasn't interested. He was like, no, that's not what I do. Blah, blah, blah. I'm a pass. And I was like, okay, cool. And then like maybe a couple of months later, he's like, you know what? Actually, I'm writing this story on X, Y, and Z, and your client, has a background in this. So how about we have him talk about his background in that, and then we can incorporate what he's doing now into the story. So even though he said no the first time, because I pitched him, is now on his radar. And so now when it does make sense, he knows who to come to. So I wouldn't say it's complete money wasted, because now you're on people's radar. And once you start to be on people's radar, even though it wouldn't make sense at that exact moment, just if you keep up the momentum, it will click eventually. And it happens with both small brands and large brands. Like, do you think that Burger King or Toyota or, Nissan, like they do pitching and there's times when we work with those large brands and it just doesn't work. But what a good PR person will do, at least in my opinion, is to find out why it's not working. So my job is I feel like if I can get a hold of a reporter, even if it's just one, I ask why. Why are you saying no to this? And sometimes it has absolutely nothing to do with this pitch. Sometimes it's like, let's say today is October, 29th. 29th. So we're a few days into elections. So it's like we're competing against election news right now. I live in Chicago, so we talking about what's going on in Chicago as far as violence and things like that. So who got shot today is also top news. We're in a pandemic, so now you have pandemic news. If it was a couple of days ago, then you got to compete with World Series news. If it was a couple of weeks ago, you got to talk about NBA finals. So then there's the weather. So you got all of those things that is going to take, like all these breaking news factors is going to take precedent before your story is even going to be considered. So it's like, like sometimes I like, what's going on? And they like, Vanessa, it was some kids got killed in a bus, in a bus today. We got to cover that. We're sending all of our people to, make sure we're getting around the clock coverage on that. So it's like, sometimes it has absolutely nothing to do with you. So, and then sometimes it's like, well, this just, like you said, this isn't clickbait worthy. And that's how I found out that's important for reporters. Like a friend of mine who's a reporter, he says, my credibility is by how many clicks I get on the article. I wrote this article for you a couple of months ago. I didn't get clicks. I'm not doing those type of stories anymore because I have the reputation to uphold with my editor. So I have to make sure that I write a story that gets clicks. So when I have a client and they want to be in that particular publication, we have to make sure that they're not just covering it just for the sake of covering it, but it's a mutually beneficial story for them as well. So sometimes it's just like the pieces aren't connecting. Sometimes it's personal. Maybe sometimes it is personal. Like maybe because you were an X publication, this publication is mad because they're in competition with each other and they don't want to cover cover you because their competition covered you first. And so they don't want to feel like they're getting their leftovers. It's a lot of different things, but I would say a good PR person will at least try to figure out why is it not working. And then it's always good to it's always good to have like different approaches. I think everyone always think about public relations as I want to be in the media. I want to be on the news. I want to be, on this radio station. I want to be on this TV program. And sometimes there's like a lot of smaller things that you can do that will probably have a heavier impact. Maybe it's, how about we partner with this one particular influencer and do some IG lives with this one particular influencer who has X amount of followers, who's diehard hip hop fans, or diehard cookie fans if you're a cookie business, or their financial wellness. This is an influencer who's all about financial wellness, and they, and they're talking about how they came out of debt or, got their credit score up. And maybe that makes more sense for you than being in, Essence or ABC or Entertainment Tonight. So it's like, okay, we didn't get this, but let's do something else. Let's do something a little bit smaller, because at the end of the day, you want to keep the traction going, and it's about keeping a conversation going. So even if I don't get the client exactly what they want, I try to get them something.
Right. Indeed. So I know you work with a lot of artists, a lot of music artists. Is that a good situation? Is that a good relationship? Like up and coming artists, should they even be thinking about PR? Do they need to get the music right? They need to get their buzz on their own, jump on social media. What's been kind of your experience? And I'm sure this will reach the ears of some artists, and that might be something they're wondering based on what you have the ability to do.
Oh my gosh, I hate that you asked me that question. That's a very loaded question. Okay. Before I answer this question, any artists that I've worked with, I love you all dearly. I think you guys are talented, and I do not regret any I do not regret any experience that I have with you guys, and I don't have anything bad to say with any artist that I've worked with. However, I'm gonna use one artist that I've worked with in the past as an example, and I'll leave it at that. This was like a while ago.
Okay.
Working with artists is very tricky, especially on a one-on-one basis. I think working with an artist is easier when they have some sort of representation, like a manager, or something like that, because artists, and I know, and I can say this because I'm truly an artist at heart, at heart, are extremely flaky. They're flaky individuals. I don't want to say flaky, but they're very flighty. They're all over the place, and they have to be that way. I don't want to take that away from them, because they have to be that way, because it's that essence of them that allows them to be a great artist.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that as a bad thing, but it's like, because you're an artist, and because you're an artist, and you're flighty, and you're all over the place, and you're a dreamer, and and you kind of have to be a little egotistical, and you're emotional, and so it's harder to work with some artists, because they change their mind, like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. Well, now I'm on this and this, and it's like, and it's like they need somebody to reel them in. And if you're working with them on a PR basis, that's not your job. So it's easier to work with the artist, with the manager, and to work with that manager. Like, let's be real. Let's take it back a bit. Artists that we know of, like big artists, are typically working with a large label, right? So back in the day, most artists, their PR person wasn't an independent PR person. It was the PR person that was from the label.
Right.
So the label, so it would be Vanessa works with Atlantic Records. You're signed to Atlantic Records. So Atlantic Records is going to sign to you this Atlantic Records PR person, to this Atlantic Records artist, so that we can all be, we can all work great together.
Right.
So that's typically how that worked. From an independent scale, though, it's a little different. Because a lot of artists, they want to be famous right away. They want to level skip. And it can be hard. And then sometimes artists get into this thing, well, you're just my service provider, and I'm the artist, and I'm the talent. So, all you're doing is this. And it's like, no, this is a lot of work to do, to do what I'm doing. You do it and you tell me what you think. So it is difficult working with artists. But when I do get that artist where that, where it's a good working relationship, it's really good. But that's not easy. That's not an easy thing to come by. It's I admire managers. I would never be a manager, like ever. Like, that is something. I think you used to be a manager before. Kudos to you. But I think it's easier to work with an artist when they have a management team in place. And it should be, but a PR person and a publicist one-on-one, that's very difficult. I have a lot of friends that I recently had to tell them no, not because I didn't want to work with them, but I wanted to maintain our relationship. Like, it was like, I remember the first artist I worked with, I was heartbroken, because like, first he came to me, he was referred to me by someone, and I was kind of like, I don't know. Then I heard his music and it was great. And I was like, and then he told me his story about how he made the music and how he got to it. And I was just like, this is my little brother. Like, I was ready to mentor him and take him to the next level and all of this other good stuff. And then some other guys came out of nowhere and was like, we're going to be his manager. And I'm a PR person too. And I was like, okay. And I felt, I was like a little blindsided. And he was like, no, we don't want you to, we don't want to eliminate you. Long story short, met with the guys, and basically dude said, here, take your little marketing plan. And, and basically low key told me that I wasn't really doing anything for him. And he went to them, and it was very heartbreaking, because it was like I was very dedicated, and it was just like, it's like I think I think artists feel like when they work with someone who's not like in a business capacity, I think because they think we're business people that we're not people.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get it. I was in that world, and I think you're right. Artists is very, they're very different than a business or even an entrepreneur, because in many cases it's about being famous, right? It's kind of, and that's to become famous. It's a lot that they'll do, right? It's a lot that they'll do that probably isn't probably the best way to get down, but that's their focus, and that's what they're trying to have happen. I think that's a good segue.
Wait, before you segue, mm-hmm. I want to say this one last thing. Mm-hmm. However, noting that I told you that I'm an artist at heart, and yep. And my background was originally in music, I have a new caveat for working with artists.
Okay.
So, and you're probably one of the exclusive people to get this. Some people know about this, but it's the first time I'm saying this publicly. My caveat is, if you're going to work with me and you're an artist, then I have to be some sort of producer on your project.
Wow. So, see, this is a good segue, because I was about to go there, because I know your background. I know that you're an artist at heart. You've been in the world of PR for the last, 15 years, et cetera. And I'm seeing you evolve, right? And I know even in that story that you just shared, Vanessa does more than PR, right? Even if you've hired her and brought her aboard for PR, she ends up doing more. And so it seems like it's a logical step. I was watching you on live recently talking about how the pandemic and so forth has caused you to sit back and kind of evolve and expand your business. And so I'd love to hear how you've kind of taken your love for music, your artistry, as well as your experience in PR, and kind of pulled it together in something that I think is going to be dynamic. Tell us more about that.
Okay, I'm gonna try to say this as quickly as possible because it's layered.
Okay.
So, as a kid, you saw on the live, I started taking. That was the first thing. Took piano lessons. So I took piano lessons for many years. Did other things too, but we're just gonna stick with piano lessons for right now. Took piano lessons for many years. Stopped for a second. Did concert choir and voice lessons. Got to college. Stopped for a second again. Graduated college. Took up piano again. Stopped when I got a full-time job because I couldn't keep up with it. So then recently my dad had started playing the piano again. So I was like, oh, I want to play the piano again too. But I knew I didn't have the discipline to remember to practice. And so the thing that I remembered was that even the good thing about me taking lessons was that even if I didn't practice, taking lessons was at least 1 week out of the, once a week that I got to play. So even, of course, playing every day is going to sharpen your skills, but once a week is still better than nothing at all. Right. So I was like, well, let me start taking lessons again. So I knew a guy that I went to grad school with. I got my master's in arts management from Columbia Music Business. One of my classmates, he has a music school, Alan Kern, Senses the Soul Music, shout him out. And he had reached out to me about some PR. So I did a little PR for him. And I was like, you know what? I should take some lessons from him too. He's right down the street, 15 minutes away. It's convenient. I'm going to start taking lessons again. So started taking lessons again, dusting off the chops or whatever. Right. And I remember before, the pandemic, I would talk to artists, like my artist friends, like artistic friends. And they would look at me like, oh, isn't that cute? Vanessa playing the piano. Like, it felt very condescending.
Yeah.
Felt very condescending. And I don't think they meant it that way. And I don't think that they're bad people. And I don't turn my nose up at them. But I also realized that I created this narrative of who I am for so long that because I created this narrative, people have are naturally inclined to think that that's all you are, if that's all they show you. So I was like, oh, it's time to show them, So of course, the pandemic, we're all kind of secluded. And so now I'm getting more artistic and, my background, not only was in music, but my bachelor's is in arts management. So I took visual arts and theater. And so like now I'm dabbling with that. So now I've done painted some pictures and I took improv online and some voice lessons. And I'm just like, you know what, it's time to do this. And it's like, I'm doing these PR campaigns, but then I'm also listening to the project or seeing the project, and I also have recommendations. And it's like, well, I wish I was in the production process of it. So then instead of you just saying, okay, Vanessa, here's the finished product, go out and get me what you can.
Yeah.
I can get you in production phase and say, well, knowing that this is what we want at the end, how about we incorporate some of these things, in production? So, when it is finished, we already have some meat to work with. And it's not like I'm just telling you this because I'm a PR person, but because I also know what I'm talking about, because actually I've studied music and arts longer than I actually practice PR.
Right. Right.
It was just that PR paid the bills.
That's right. That's right. That's dope. I'm super excited for you. The experience I know is going to be much different and more fulfilling. I think, along the way, if I remember back to my management days, that was one of the reasons that even though it didn't pay much of anything when I was working with comedian actor Lil Real, it was a collaborative effort, right? It wasn't just go to this side and go do X, Y, and Z. It was about the comedy. It was about what you think about that bit, what you think about my set tonight. We would chat. And once you're a part of that collaborative piece, is not really just about the check. It's really about the person, the project, the overall outcome of you're more vested, I guess. You're more vested at the end of the day. And so I think that's going to be awesome and dope for you. So congratulations on that evolution.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I actually was surprised at first, like the first couple of people that I told this to, they were like, oh, and I felt some type of way about it, but then I stuck to it. And then other people were like, yeah, that makes sense. So I am, producing a project, and I have worked with some artists and ghost written for them a little bit. And, so it's like some people will be like, no, I only want to see you do this. But then other people are like, actually, that's kind of dope. Okay, let's get to work. And I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. Like there's this one artist friend that I was working with, and I created a verse for him. And it was like a few bars, and I was like, yeah, I created a couple bars for you. He was like, all right, record and send it to me. I was like, oh crap, shit. Like, I'm getting nervous, so I'm in my basement where I am right now, recorded it and sent it to him. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, oh my gosh, what he's going to say. He's like, I like it. I was like, for real? You like my music? You like my lyrics?
That's dope. I know you have to get out of here. Before I let you go, give me one of your craziest PR stories that you can actually share. Kind of close us out on that, something we would enjoy.
Okay, I will tell you, I actually shared this on another podcast, but I hope so. But it's still fun. It's a fun story to tell.
I was gonna say, what if I want my own? No, I'm kidding.
Then I'll think about it and I'll come back and tell you a new one when you bring me back the next time. Okay. But I think it's a different audience that's listening to both anyway. So anyway, so back in 2009, I was working at Hill & Knowlton. And at that time, we were working with the Chicago 2016 Olympic Bid Committee, trying to bring the Olympics to Chicago. So long time ago. So 2016 has come and gone. So that tells you this was a long time ago.
Right.
So we're coming up on the final 2 days of when the International Olympic Committee is going to announce who is going to get the Olympics.
Yep.
So it was like Chicago, Rio de Janeiro, of course, London, and Tokyo, I think. So it's these 4 cities. And so the day before the announcement, we did this run with Scottie Pippen and Tony Kukoc. Oh my gosh, right? So in 2009, like that was a big deal because like no one has really heard from these guys like since The Last Dance, before we even knew what The Last Dance was, right? So it's like, Tony Kukoc and Scottie Pippen. I was like so excited. I got their basketball cards. I watched all of the finals, like huge like Bulls fan. So I was like super excited. And I was the one that created their tour. I mean, like their media tour in Chicago that day. Like, okay, we're going to hit up this spot, this spot, this spot, this spot. We're going to do these interviews. Like I was the one that did all of it. Right. And so I remember my boss was like, don't get super excited, just be cool. And I'm like, all right. So anyway, so we had Scottie Pippen, right? So Scottie Pippen, people say a lot of things about Scottie Pippen. He was cool with me. Me and Scottie Pippen, shout out to Scottie. We like, I felt like he was big brother to me that, during that situation. Sorry, I dropped something. So anyway, so we were at NBC, NBC, we did the segment and we're about to go. And I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, we got to hurry up and go. We got this next segment. It's, in a few minutes, we got to roll. So we're walking out the door and I don't see Scottie. Like, where's Scottie Pippen at? Like, how did I lose a 6'7" dude? Like, oh my gosh, I lost Scottie. So I'm like, heart is racing. I look up on the screen, the little monitor. Scottie is doing the weather. Like, oh my gosh. So now I got to go back into the studio and go get Scottie Pippen from doing the weather. I am literally, so if you know the weather, like they have like this green screen. Mm-hmm. I am literally standing right behind the green screen. So as soon as he's done, I can just snatch him up like, which is so funny because like, I watched him as a little girl, so right. So it's like, who am I to be like, would you come and would you come like? And so that's my funny PR story. Was having to grab Scottie from doing the weather at NBC so we can make our next visit to the next news station that we had to go to.
That's dope. I thought you were going to share. I think you had a TI story. I think you shared some artist with me. I can't remember. You shared it with me before, but we'll do that next go round. As always, we want to appreciate and send a shout out to everyone who joined us tonight, who checked out our conversation with used to be PR,
Vanessa still PR,
but now we have this new dynamic she's going to be creating. So make sure you check out her and look for her. Make sure you continue to support the Droppin' Knowledge podcast. Go ahead and follow us on Instagram, follow us on Facebook. Make sure that you go to our website and you subscribe and go to our YouTube page and subscribe. Vanessa, want to say thank you. I know it was short notice, me reaching out to you, but I appreciate you jumping on as always and dropping nuggets and gems. Best of luck in the next chapter of the agency, Abron. And I'm sure I will see you in these Chicago streets, hopefully, once the world is better, sooner than later.
Thank you.
All right. For everyone else, peace out. And next week, the last and final episode of season 2. Peace.
Bye.